Narcissism versus narcissistic personality disorder. This is a critical distinction to make, something that's becoming more common than ever. Welcome to Talking with Docs. I'm Dr. Brad Weaning.
I'm Dr. Paul Zalzal. We're finally going to explain that word that you've been using a lot in the last year, okay? And we have a psychiatrist here to help us because we don't know what we're talking about without him.
Hi, I'm Dr. Barakat. I'm a psychiatrist in our community here.
Oh, okay. Thank you for coming and shedding some light on this very commonly used
hot topic
and important topic.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Please help us understand what narcissism is versus narcissistic personality disorder and what makes them different.
So narcissism is a belief in yourself, essentially,
okay,
right? A kind of self-centered belief in your abilities and your ability to function and be productive. So in some ways, it's not a bad thing to have a healthy amount of narcissism. So we talk about healthy narcissism as opposed to vulnerability, low self-esteem, etc.
Okay.
When it crosses over into a disorder in our world, anything that's a disorder means it's causing distress, social and occupational dysfunction, impact on relationships, your work. At some point, the symptoms that you develop are maladaptive for you,
okay,
and impact things around you. So in my world, I tend not to see a lot of primary narcissistic personality disorder,
okay,
because it has to cause enough distress. Often people are coming in with depression or anxiety for other reasons to see a psychiatrist, and you recognize that this is actually perpetuating a lot of those symptoms.
Do they have depression and anxiety because their partner is a narcissist?
Yes, that is sometimes what happens.
All right, fair. So let's define it. Okay, what is narcissism and what is narcissistic personality disorder?
So in order for someone to have narcissistic personality disorder, there's a number of different traits that they need to have. So one is a sense of grandiosity, right? Out of keeping with their ability, so that they have special abilities, special status, special skills that other people don't have.
Okay.
And it's often out of keeping with what's actually realistic or reality.
Okay.
They have fantasies about, unlimited power or what love should be for them or what a relationship should provide for them because of those abilities.
Okay.
They have a sense of entitlement. So they're entitled to a certain treatment by others. Certain things in their lives they feel should be coming naturally to them. So those are core features as well. They believe that they're special, so that they should associate with people that are also special.
Oh, okay.
They deserve that. That's the realm in which they should live in terms of relationships and work because of that specialness, right? And so they have a lot of these different, and a need for admiration is another one, right? So the feeling that they constantly need to be admired, complimented, acknowledged for their specialness.
Right.
So that's kind of the sense of entitlement side of things, but it's accompanied by a number of other things, right? A lack of empathy.
Right. This is a pervasive theme.
Yeah. So they don't appreciate how other people are feeling or how they're impacting others.
Because they're so concerned with themselves.
Yes, they're absolutely so self-concerned that they miss that, right? They can also have kind of arrogant or come across as arrogant or haughty or irritable in the way that they interact. And they can manipulate others. No, sometimes unknowingly, right? Just to get their ends met in terms of how people are meant to feel, why they're letting them down. So they're challenging to deal with. And so those are some of the core symptoms as well.
I feel like there's an inherent lack of self-awareness associated with all this too, because like you said, you don't see a lot of this in your practice. So these people aren't coming and saying, hey, I need help. I have this disorder.
No, they're often coming because they're dealing with depression because they've lost relationships, they've lost jobs, things are not working out and they can't figure out why.
Right.
And so often, yes, they don't know. That's true. You're often having to introduce the possibility of the concept, and it's a challenging discussion to have, right?
I bet.
Is it also possible that someone else says, hey, just FYI, you have MPD? Like would someone else be telling them, like a spouse or a partner, someone that they've had conflict in a relationship with, saying,
maybe
hey,
an ex.
maybe an ex.
I think that's absolutely, that can be the case where people will say that, but often it's a challenge. It's a challenge to say that to your partner.
Sure.
Often the partner is saying it to their own therapist or someone else or their family members to try and get an understanding of what's happening.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the things that it really interferes with is relationships, because I feel like in the sentence I hear ex and narcissist in the same sentence more than any other two words.
Relationships is absolutely, work relationships, life relationships, eventually people will be isolated unless they're in positions of real power where they can kind of exert that, and like a boss who has a narcissistic personality disorder is going to be challenging. Because you can't just fire your boss or get rid of your boss. The other thing that it's important that I haven't mentioned is these are conditions based on insecurity.
Oh, okay.
Right? So that because what makes it a disorder is that it comes across as
Look at me.
A, B, C, and D. I'm wonderful.
Right.
But underneath, there's a real poor sense of self. And that's why people with narcissistic personality disorder are often envious of others or feel that they need to be envied, right? Underneath it all, what creates, it's insecurity driving it. It's anxiety that's actually driving the behaviors.
Yes.
And that's where the therapeutic work can sometimes begin. And again, there's different, things that create the environment for that. So it's not just purely in this that I'm wonderful and other people just aren't seeing it.
Yes.
Underneath it all, there's something driving it as a defense almost.
Yeah, I remember it being described as having like a real thin shell, that thin shell around you that you.
And that's why the reactions are so strong, to try and protect the shell.
Right. So a couple questions I have. A, how common is this? Like if we put a number on, I know that's difficult, but that'd be the first thing. And then the second thing is, have we identified things that happen either like through your childhood or in your relationships that increase the chances that someone could kind of shift over from, hey, I'm trying to be confident to compensate for some stuff, but now I'm pathological?
I think it's not that common.
Okay.
Kind of anywhere between, around, I think, 2% of the population.
Okay.
That's pretty common,
Which
2%.
which seems high, but it's I don't find it, at least clinically, it's
not
not as
seeing-
common as other conditions.
Your office is not full of NPD
No.
patients.
No, but
No.
that might not be because of its prevalence. That might be just lack of awareness.
Absolutely. And again, it speaks to people out in the world having to navigate people with these vulnerabilities.
Right.
And sorry, the second question was?
Do we know what causes it? You know,
Well,
like is it 'cause
like
of your
anything,
genetics?
it's unknown, but there are kind of genetic variability, genetic considerations and neurobiological considerations. In terms of the psychosocial, a history of neglect or trauma can often cause it. People will often think, oh, you must be narcissistic because you were pampered as a child or not held accountable
Or it's maybe opposite.
or too positively reinforced. It could be that case, but often it's the opposite. It's neglect, it's abuse that creates an environment where someone develops this kind of personality.
Yeah, I feel like it's something that you see a lot in like movies and things. You know what I mean? There's always that character like that. You know what I mean? That you just see that through. And the other thing too, historically and even presently, a lot of political figures seem to have this disorder. You know what I mean? Like historically, the dictators that we've hated in the world have all those things you just described.
Yeah, I think there's a distinction between narcissistic personality disorder and what kind of we see in the media as malignant narcissism.
Right.
So I think for the purposes of entertainment and media, it's often the kind of malignant. It's the severe form of narcissistic, where you have all those things, but you also have antisocial kind of behavior. So lying, stealing, cheating in order to get what you need.
Yeah.
Again, lack of empathy. So the manipulation is even to another level.
Right.
And there's also kind of a level of sadism in narcissists. So there's a rage, right? So with malignant narcissists, there's a pleasure in causing pain to
Like the
people,
boo-ah.
right? Yeah. So there's kind of there's a paranoia.
Wow.
Things that people are out to get me and they deserve to be punished, or I need to defend myself, so it's justified.
Right.
And I take some sort of pleasure in being able to exact revenge on them. So again, that's important to distinguish from run-of-the-mill narcissistic personality disorder, which comes from vulnerability and is causing distress or impairment.
Okay, so how do you diagnose it? And then really what everyone that's watching right now is there any hope for these people? Like, is there treatment that can actually get someone who has narcissistic personality disorder to recognize, hey, I have some of this stuff and I need to try to change?
I think diagnosing has to be, is done often with a professional,
Okay.
right? So whether it's a psychologist or a psychiatrist who's assessing for that alongside other conditions, just someone who needs to know the criteria, while you telling your story is recognizing some blind spots to what's being told.
Right.
And often there's collateral, right? So it's the impact on family.
For sure.
So you have to talk to the family, right? And find out what is their experience of this person who is suffering for depression or anxiety. And sometimes you recognize that that's the case. Sometimes it comes across in the clinical interaction because of the sense of entitlement, right?
Right.
So that it's a clinical assessment,
Okay.
and it's usually over time to be able to truly establish that it's not just traits, it's not just narcissism, it's a personality disorder.
Right.
Okay, and then treatment. How do you treat
The
that?
hallmark of treatment is therapy, but longer term therapy, right?
Right.
Because there's a whole the process of getting someone with NPD to recognize it and kind of appreciate that it is a major contributor to the difficulties they've had.
Right.
Is the challenge, because someone who gets feedback at work that you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you're destroying relationships, will be defensive about that,
Right.
and they won't kind of see see it at first. So it's really over time. And working with a therapist, and again, it's the trust of the therapeutic relationship. Cognitive behavioral therapy can be helpful, but again, it's often a longer term type of therapy that's necessary.
Okay, so but there is hope. I mean, because I've often heard there's no hope for this, but there is.
There is hope, as long as you can find a therapist that's a good match who can challenge you on some of those things.
Right.
And when you have those moments where the narcissism is bumping up against the therapy, can hold their ground.
Right.
And help you to develop insight.
You just need a
Right.
narcissistic therapist. more than you.
The therapist needs to have a healthy amount of confidence.
Sure.
That they can.
So they need trait, not disorder. The therapist needs to have a bit of trait.
Well,
characteristics.
Characteristics, you know.
And I think that's what's lost is that some of the traits of narcissism can be functional and survivalist and useful to make you successful and determined and resilient and all this stuff. But at a point, it crosses over and then becomes a problem.
I mean, we'll often have a question like, can the Prime Minister of Canada exist without some sort of amount of narcissism? To put your, to want to.
You maybe wouldn't want to consider that job.
Right.
Yeah, to be at that level, to be out in front, to be a leader, to be in charge of such important things, you have to have a level of narcissism and overwhelming self-belief to overcome all the slings, arrows, whatever it might be, even if your intentions are good. I'm not saying you have to have narcissistic personalities, but that's an example of what might be a healthy narcissism.
Athletes.
Absolutely. Athletes, elite
CEOs, whatever. Like you want someone who's going to say, okay, I'm good for this. I'm going to be good at this job. Yeah.
Okay, so there is that. So it's almost like a spectrum, right, of varying amounts of narcissism that you can have. And once you cross over that point where it's interfering with your life significantly, your relationships, your job, that becomes a disorder.
Yes.
Okay, and these things are all defined in your Bible, the DSM, right? Is that sort of where you draw?
That's kind of where it starts.
Okay.
Right, but again, the DSM, it's a separate talk altogether, is very descriptive. It really touches the surface on a lot of these things, and it's through your other training and reading, et cetera, that you really find out.
DSM is a book that comes out every 10 years. They update it, and it just describes a lot of the psychiatric conditions that you deal with.
It's very phenomenological and descriptive in the moment. It's not perfect, but at least gives you a starting point. But it's not in place of, right?
Right.
It's not like you can just go, here are the symptoms of narcissistic. But it's a helpful start. But a thorough assessment is what's necessary.
Well, there you go.
Now hopefully this helped clear some of the muddy waters that are out there when it comes to narcissistic traits and personality disorder. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to our channel. Maybe don't share it with someone that you think is a narcissist. If you're gonna just choose your shares very thoughtfully.
Yeah, and your comments as well. People will recognize.
Be kind and respectful in the comments, please.
If your partner reads it, they'll be like, "Yeah, that's me. You're talking about me in that comment." Right. So, but at least we're trying to raise some awareness about it and sort of help understand the difference between disorder, a personality trait, and all those kind of things. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We really appreciate it. We couldn't have tackled that one on our own.
No, definitely not.
And remember, you are in charge of your own health. If you think you're dealing with someone in your life with this going on, or you think you have it, maybe start to talk about it.
Do you know if we would have tackled it ourselves, we probably would have been called narcissists?
Yeah.
Look, they don't even think they need a psychiatrist.
That's right.
Okay, we'll see you next time.